Greetings, adventurers. This is my attempt to participate in the Dragon Week adventures created by Pointy and Ginny D as a second annual Monster Week event. They've created an open for submissions from the general creators online, and I'm throwing my hat into the ring with my concept of dragons of mixed heritage and their breath weapons. So join with me as we go exploring some alternative ways of exploring the concept of dragons of different heritages and how they may mix heritages and how we can understand their breath weapons coming from that. So let's get started with that concept right now. Let's start with the 5 metallic dragons, as they're the most foundational for the rest of this idea. But they're also going to be less familiar because they've made some of the biggest changes in this selection of 5. So we'll start with that. Starting with the 2 least changed metals, or metallic dragons, would be the gold dragon with its fiery breath, and the silver dragon. This time its weapon changed to a breath weapon of a water blast. These are mostly unchanged in large part because gold and fire seem to work decently well with where we're going with some of the chromatics. But the lunar connection with silver dragons is also connected with tidal forces as far as I consider with this example. So having it connected with water, as we're working in a realm predominantly dealing with elemental forces. So earth, air, fire, water, and a 5th essence for the 5th dragon. So this is still one of the least changed ones, but as we go into this next one, we'll show you the example of copper and a new one. These 2 have copper dragon with its breath weapon of wind, which is similar to the catapult spell, and the tin dragon, which seems to be a new insert here for what would otherwise be considered the bronze dragon, with its breath weapon of earth. Now, in order to explain that a little bit better, the wind breath weapon is not using its wings, but full on breathing a gust of wind in a line like the catapult spell. The earth weapon is similar to a gout of flame from a red dragon or a gold dragon, except for its production of this gout of cool, dry experience that condenses on the surfaces that it's blasted against, forming essentially a layer of cement. So it's a stone forming breath weapon that looks like a gout of flame but is cool and dry and produces almost like a frosting of cement or stone on the target, leading to entrapment. And the last dragon of the set would be the zinc dragon with its breath weapon of void or cold. This one's a little more trickier to explain, as it is a equivalent of the negative energy force from traditional planar explanations, but it's also not. It is not necessarily a negative force, only in the sense that the absence of heat that you feel when you open the refrigerator is not a force in and of itself, it's an absence of heat. That's the equivalent of what we're dealing with here. This is the negative force of absorbing energy through a breath weapon like a radiant beam or a gout of flame. So it tends to form frost and cold in its environment, but it is not ice in and of itself. And that brings us to why these breath weapons and these particular metal choices. The idea behind some of this here is more along the lines of elemental forces allow us to use combinations. So if you were to combine a gold dragon with its fire breath and a silver dragon with its water breath, you'd have a water fire para-elemental effect in its breathing weapon. So water and fire, in my sense, is either steam as a gas weapon or acid, which is a burning liquid. So an electrum dragon, which is part gold, part silver, would be acid and steam as its breath weapons. Whereas if you were to take something along the lines of a tin dragon, which is earth, and intermix it with a gold dragon, which would be fire, you would end up with a magma breath weapon. And so that combines all the possibilities of intermixing your metallic dragons in such a way that you can have new breath weapons that make sense for the combinations that you're building with different metals. So a copper and a gold would be a rose gold or a red gold, and it would be fire meets air. And for me, that para-elemental force would be lightning, because it's air fire. It's fire from the air. Now, you have certain things where you can have combinations of, like, what would a pewter dragon be? Well, bronze would be a combination of tin and copper. So a combination of tin and bronze would be a higher tin content alloy. And so this is something that you may not be able to distinguish between an ingot of tin and an ingot of silver, but I would guarantee you that the dwarf in the party would be able to distinguish the difference between the two of them. So it gives a little bit of an advantage to mineral harvesting player races and characters to be able to figure out what they're facing when they're facing a dragon of metallic origin. So a pewter dragon would be a bronze and a tin dragon having a child together. It's a higher content of tin with a small amount of copper ancestry to lend it the pewter's strength in comparison to plain raw tin. Now, zinc and copper make brass. Copper and silver make sterling silver. So you have at this point the ability to combine alloys of different metals in certain patterns to form both an alloy dragon, and it's have a reasonably good chance of understanding what its general weapon was likely to be. Its breath weapons were likely to be. Now that moves us off into the 5 chromatic dragons. Now this is going to be pretty straightforward, as these are just corruptions of the metallic dragons. So in my understanding of how this works best for gameplay is more along the idea of the chromatic dragons have earned their chromatic nature by being susceptible and giving in to corruption. What does that corruption mean? Well, basically, the corruption is brimstone. or sulfur, burning sulfur. Like the expectation we oftentimes hear of, like the sulfurous burning pits of fiery hell. Well, chromatic dragons succumb to temptations by evil forces from hell or Hades, or however you want to frame it. And that sulfuric corruption meshes really nicely with the 5 different chromatics that we're going to be working with. There's only one real major change in one of the colors here, and their breath weapons are all the counterpart to the metallic dragons. So red breathes fire. Now here's where we get a little bit different, is the match for silver would be black, breathes water, brackish, miry, gross, corrupt, rotting bog water, but its breath weapon is water. Copper's equivalent would be blue, because copper sulfate is blue. Silver sulfate would be black. Gold sulfate is red. And that's why this works really well. Now, tin sulfate is yellow, not green. And zinc sulfate, or one of the zinc sulfur compounds that you can generate, is white. So that's why the zinc dragon has the icy breath, because its corresponding chromatic dragon also has icy breath. And so we have in this mix mineral color components: black, white, yellow, red, blue. So we have the primary colors for pigmentations, mineral pigmentations, that we can use for color combinations that match up exactly the same way with the metallic dragon's color combinations. So like where you would have a tin and copper making bronze, you would have copper blue, or the blue chromatic dragon, and the yellow chromatic dragon mixing to form a green chromatic dragon with their combined weapon of earth and air to form dust or sandblasting as their power, their breath weapon. Now, I have it in my mind that both chromatic and metallic also have the gaseous version of the weapon. So they can both breathe the gas and the, well, I say gas, but what I technically mean is the airborne version of it. So where earth and air would be a sandblasting attack, the airborne version of that would be dust, both in chromatic and in metallic. So if you took copper and gold, or red and blue, and made purple, you end up with a breath weapon of fire meets air, which is lightning, like I said previously. So a purple dragon's breath weapon would be lightning. Now zinc's breath weapon and white's breath weapon is the cold. When you pair zinc or white with any of the other colors, let's work with white, since that's what we're working with right now. The white dragon's breath weapon combined with, say, red, fire. The negative of fire would be shadow, because it's light, shade. And the negative for something like the white paired with copper or paired with blue would be silence. Just like the silence spell. That would be their breath weapon. White paired with water, so silver or black. White and black would form a gray dragon. And the gray dragon's ability would be ice, because water and cold make ice. And white paired with yellow, which would be earth, would be the equivalent of vacuum. No substance, no matter, just vacuum. So that's the formation of the chromatic and the metallic dragon pairings that I can foresee and how their breath weapons compare. Now that brings us to the question of whether or not we're going to have metallic and chromatic dragons intermixing as well. And quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that's up to the DM and the table that is playing the game. But part of the reason I've made it possible so that chromatic and metallic dragons have both the destructive attack version of their breath weapon and the more passive airborne version is so that you can mix and match and it doesn't change anything. You can take a copper dragon and a zinc or a white dragon and get a brass white or brass pale blue verdigris on it dragon. And would that be a neutral dragon? Possibly. But I built this on the premise that the corruption is earned. It's not inherited. And I also built this with the concept that the gaseous form of the weapons are... I keep using the term gaseous because in the traditional sense, the gold dragon might have something like a sleep or a slow gas breath weapon. But I've built these so that in the case of the gold and red dragon, the more passive version of it is ash, an ash cloud. So these are cloud weapons. An ash cloud, for white or for silver and black would be fog. For copper and blue would be something more along the lines of just a gas. And for yellow and tin, it would be more of a dust, like a fine dust. And I built those in my mind as a possibility for enchanting them as dusts, so that they're the equivalent of, like, say, silver and black able to breathe water. Their ability to breathe a fog cloud, that fog can be an enchanted fog. So they can cast their magic into their fog breath weapon. Same thing with the red and the gold, as they can enchant their ash cloud that they breathe out, so that maybe they embed a illusion or a mirage effect, so that you're chasing after things that you can't see or you think you see within the cloud. Or maybe they embed the light spell, so it's a glowing ash cloud or a glowing fog cloud. Perhaps they include a attack spell within it, so that it does some damage as you're exposed and enmeshed in the cloud. So the spell Stinking Cloud or Noxious Clouds effects can be embedded into this breath weapon. Now, whether or not each individual dragon has its own spell effect to its fog weapon, or if they just cast into that weapon, into that breath weapon, is up to each table as they play. But I think this adds a variety of dragon opportunities for players and DMs to explore. I love the idea of this in part because it grants the ability to have players encounter a rose gold or electrum dragon, and you know instantly what its breath weapon is, and it broadens the field so substantially into the different types of dragons you can encounter, and it allows for this intermingling of the different groups of dragons in ways that are not allowed for so far in the game that I've explored so far. So that's my idea here. I thought that it would be fun to share it, and I had been playing with this idea for months before now, and only found out about Dragon Week within the last few days. So this is a bit of a scramble to get this posted up here like this. But hopefully you find the idea interesting as well, and hopefully this makes it up in time for Dragon Week to come to an end. So I appreciate Pointy Hat and Ginny D for helping this happen, and I love the fact that the whole community of Dragon Week's YouTubers posted so much great content this week. So I'm already anticipating maybe being part of next year's Monster Week. I can't wait to hear what it'll be. Maybe I'll be better prepared for it.